This constriction of the muscles affects your posture. Is that most of our reality, we're unconscious to it.
Especially
It
with
makes
someone.
divorce attorneys rich.
Can stress-related pattern physically reshape posture, tension, or nervous system regulation over time?
Yeah, can it do that? When you look at stress from, stress is a general term. I'd like to get specific. Let's say you're going through rejection and abandonment, or you're going through a rupture or a relationship dynamic where you're disconnected from your partner. Or your kid is going through a really rough time, there is a reaction within your body where your body wants to protect your vital organs. So there will be a contraction and a constriction of the muscles. So this constriction of the muscles affects your posture. So this your body is trying to protect itself. And so, especially if you're dealing with guilt and shame, where you have this sense of unworthiness coming up, your body's going to go and protect your vital organs, because who's judging? You're judging yourself. So it's like your body is posturing to protect itself from your own self-abandonment and self-judgment.
So is that why when people are ashamed or they feel guilt, they stoop, they can't look up, they look down? When you're talking to them, they're looking down, they're not looking straight into your face, or they're looking down, because they're a bit timid?
It's shame. If I'm holding on to shame, I'm showing up in the relationship dynamic with you, Grace, with I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. Okay. So it's this, how people bow to, monarchs and everything. Yeah. It's a sign of respect, or essentially it's like, I'm not worthy. So we look down, we cover our genitals, our heart, like all these vulnerable organs because of our unworthiness. So shame is especially toxic shame that we're carrying, is a very physical manifestation, right? So as a chiropractor, you can come to me and feel that postural stuff, and I'll work on that. But in my practice, I don't have the time to address what's causing you to be so protective. I'm just dealing with the symptom of it. And that's why I left chiropractic. So it's really to help people rewire the conditioned kind of self-abandonment and self-judgment, abandonment, blaming and shaming of themselves, so that they can show up in the world open-hearted rather than guarded. So the musculoskeletal system, it becomes the armor to protect us from attacks, external attacks that we're perceiving, but the real attack is coming from our own selves.
Yes, because we feel unworthy. And so
Correct.
That way we feel, not good enough. We tend not to be open or to be more self-aware to what is happening to us. And I think everything boils down to being self-aware that, okay, this is what has happened to me, and that's why I'm reacting this way.
Well, the thing is, you're right. Self-awareness is the goal. But the problem is that most of our reality, we're unconscious to it. And Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate. So I realized that the best way that I can make the unconscious conscious is my body. My body is my unconscious mind. So if I'm sitting here and I'm hunched over, then it's up to me to inquire, what am I protecting myself from? What is it that I'm holding on to shame for? And I can do all the physical treatments, go to doctors, but if we don't address the shame that we're carrying somatically and move that through the body by facing it and feeling it and alchemizing it, then we're just talk, and we're not addressing the root of it. You're right about self-awareness, but most of us are completely unconscious of these patterns. That's why we got to find the unconscious and make it conscious, which is why I love shadow work so much.
Thank you so much. Doing the inner work. So how do you explain to clients the connection between the spine, nervous system, and emotional memory? Because the guilt and shame maybe happened 10 years ago, but we still feel it because it's in our memory.
It's hidden and trapped in our body. Well, the spine is merely a housing center for the nervous system, just like the skull is for the brain, and the brain is the nervous system. So the brain and nervous system, the spine is just the housing of it. And essentially what we do is, when you bring the awareness of where you're carrying that, what I like to do is, as they tell the story of what's happening. For example, a client, he's still 12 years ago, he has this affair, they heal, they make it work, and she's grown a lot and he's still carrying the shame of that. And so how do I make the client aware is I get him to feel the shame that he's been trying to avoid. And I get him to put his hand over where it is and take a few breaths and take time and sit in the feeling of it. And the goal here is to expand our capacity to sit in the feeling without running away or hiding or trying to overfunction, overwork, or over-explain ourselves. And the way that alchemizes is through tears, is through falling in and allowing us to go into the abyss of that shame and then being able to move through the storm of it. I take them through that whole process.
Thank you. That's quite powerful. It's like letting out the pent-up emotions.
Exactly. Releasing them, allowing them to metabolize, right? Most of us are carrying around undigested material from our past, like the guilt and the shame. I'm still carrying guilt and shame from the way that I showed up in my last relationship. So it's important to never pretend that it's not there, but whenever the anxiety starts to show up, the invitation is to pause and to feel and reflect that that's probably some unresolved emotion that needs your compassion, needs you to make some contact with that part. So I've developed this, our work is to develop this new relationship with our animal body where we're acknowledging and we're facing and feeling rather than what we normally do, which is to avoid.
Thank you. So what role does safety in the body play in healing trauma bonds and relational patterns?
Relational patterns, trauma bonds, and codependency all begin because we look to safety outside of ourselves. Codependency is, I rely on you for my own sense of internal safety. Our work is to shift from codependency, where I need you to be a certain way for me to be safe, shifting to, I don't need you, but we are here to remind each other of our own inherent ability to create safety within ourselves. And that's called co-regulation, right? And you can develop a codependent trauma bond with your therapist too, if you rely on them for safety. So you got to make sure that the person that you're going to, you're not relying on for safety, but they are teaching you how to become your own medicine. And that's the distinction. So it's in any relationship can become kind of a codependency. A trauma bond is where you have this really polarized dynamic where two people are rescuing one another, where eventually the person that becomes the rescuer ends up becoming the perpetrator. The person needing rescuing ends up becoming the victim. And then we keep going back and forth in this really toxic dynamic where the victim and the perpetrator keep getting passed again and again. And it varies at different stages of severity, like any narcissism or anything that happens. But essentially the fundamental framework for the relationship is the same. Need you to fulfill something missing within me. And without you, I'm powerless. So that sets us up for some deep toxicity. And the only solution is to learn how to become our own medicine to create safety within ourselves.
Thank you. And so, listeners, journal reflection. What relationship in my life have felt physically exhausting? How did my body respond in those moments? So my next question is, what creates the push-pull? Because that's what you just demonstrated now. The victim and the perpetrator, push and pull. So what creates the push-pull dynamic in trauma-bonded relationship from a nervous system perspective?
What creates that push-pull is the fact that there are two competing entities within all of us. And that first one is this desire for connection that's driven by the fear of abandonment. Okay? So this one part of us that fears abandonment and pushes for connection. There's this other part of us that as a child felt overwhelmed with responsibility of taking care of other people and overwhelmed with other people's emotions and never thought that their emotional well-being was met. And so that part of us is driven by the fear of being consumed or overly responsible or being eaten alive and being like losing ourselves in a relationship. And that's called the fear of engulfment. So there's two parts of us us, and all of us have it. Fear of abandonment that drives connection, fear of engulfment that pushes for space. And the irony is that when you get into a relationship, the more deeper that my fear of abandonment parts of me are running the show, I then push for connection. With you being on the other side of that table is now that energy starts to feel overwhelming, that activates my fear of engulfment, that then pushes for space. And now that push for space, because of my need for pushing for connection, causes this pull away for space, which then activates more of my need for connection, which activates more of my need for space. And it's called this infinite loop of doom, where the anxious and the avoidant is basically having a face-off with one another. And it's an exhausting loop that eventually it's part of the dynamic power struggle phase of a relationship, which eventually leads to people stay in for decades, sometimes years, months, decades, until one person either dies because they get sick of it, or a breakup happens. And so they go from the honeymoon phase to the power struggle phase, where that push and pull is happening, until hopefully, if you apply the work, this is why I created this process of becoming trigger proof, where they then become mature love, where they're no longer being run by this fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment. They have the higher self is taken over, and they're able to manage and integrate these aspects of themselves. And then now they have a team. You have a team of co-regulation. That's called mature love. And so that's where the push-pull dynamic comes from.
Oh, thank you so much for that explanation. Because it's quite interesting, because people really find it difficult to have this balance, especially
it makes divorce attorneys rich.
Yes, because it's quite difficult, especially for somebody who's avoidant, getting into a relationship with somebody who has an anxious attachment style. It's really toxic.
That's why they get into the relationship. What they're doing is they are attracted to their disowned parts of them. The avoidant has a disowned anxious part. So they're attracted to their mirror of their shadow that they have put away. They need somebody with connect. An avoidant does not match with an avoidant.
That's true.
An avoidant matches with an anxious, and the anxious is attracted to the part of that avoidant, the one who is confident, needs that space, and is chill and relaxed, and is really attracted to that part, which is their own avoidant shadow that they've shoved away. So this is where shadow work is important. We're attracted to the parts of ourselves that we've exiled. And so then after the honeymoon phase is over, we get activated and triggered by the very thing that we were once attracted to. The thing that we were once so attracted to really gets under our skin. And that's the purpose of relationship, is to manage the tension between these parts of ourselves. Without the right skills, I don't see how relationships can actually work. I'm baffled at why divorce rates are so low. Once I realized this, Grace, I was like, how can any relationship work? I can't believe divorce rates are so low, even though they're high, with all this material going on.
Be safe and be positive. And don't forget to check out our social media handles. Thank you. Bye for now.